My wife and I have been playing hide and seek for 3 days straight. By Blair Daniels. I don't know what to do. In the past 72 hours, my life has been turned upside down. Our family has been thrown into chaos. My wife is missing, and I fear she'll never return. Let me start from the beginning. My wife and I started playing hide and seek with our 2 young kids. However, they are a little too young to hide effectively. They always hide in the same spot every time. So we've found it's more fun for one of us parents to hide and then the rest of us seek. I've hidden from my wife and kids just by standing completely still in the corner of a dark room. It's amazing how our brains are programmed to see things that move. My wife gets a little more creative, but it's hard for us to do anything too elaborate because the kids are not very cooperative in waiting for us to hide. On Tuesday evening after work, we decided to play. My wife decided to hide first. I counted down from 10 with the kids holed up in the downstairs office. Ready or not, here I come. The kids bounded out of the room like wild dogs. I followed, slowly, trying to get a sense of where my wife was hiding. I'd often try to figure out what room she was hiding in first, to gently guide the kids so that we wouldn't find her too soon or spend too long looking for her. I saw her when I entered the living room. She was crouched behind the couch. I could see a bit of her elbow poking out from behind the upholstery. The kids walked right past her, too intent on checking the kitchen. I waited for them to return. As they walked back in and rounded the couch, I waited for them to squeal in delight. Except they didn't. Confused, I approached the couch. She wasn't there. Huh? Maybe I'd just seen a tag or something poking out. Or maybe she'd moved her hiding spot. Wouldn't be the first time. As I said, she's more creative at this than I am. So we moved on. We checked all the usual spots, underneath the shelving in the garage, behind the kitchen door, even in the lower kitchen cabinets. She wasn't in any of those spots. Maybe she went upstairs. I hadn't heard her go upstairs, but she can creep pretty quietly. I walked along the hallways, the kids in tow. "Jessie," I called in a sing-song voice. "We're going to find you." Gotcha. Our bedroom door was open, and there was a long, Jess-shaped lump under the covers. "Let's check Mum and Dad's bedroom," I said to the kids, pattering footsteps as they charged behind me. I reached for the light switch, flicked on the lights, then grabbed the hem of the comforter and yanked it off. My heart dropped. The bed was empty. I stared down in confusion. It must have just been bunched up weirdly, but I could have sworn it looked like a person under there. The rough shape of someone in a fetal position, legs bent, back curved. I backed out of the room. The kids and I went downstairs. "Jess," I called out. "We can't find you. Come on out." Nothing. The kids lost interest. They bounded into the family room and began playing with their cars. I was about to call her again when I noticed the chain of the basement door lock was disengaged. Aha. As I approached, my heart hammered in my chest. I knew she was waiting on the other side, waiting to jump out at me and give me a heart attack. She'd done that before. I took a deep breath and swung open the door. She wasn't there. Damp air wafted up from the basement. I clicked on the light. "Jess?" I called out. No answer. "The kids aren't playing anymore," I called down. "And you shouldn't be hiding down there anyway. These stairs are too dangerous." Nothing. I turned, about to close the door, but then something caught my eye. Black hair poking through the gap between the stairs, about halfway down. She's hiding under the stairs. I stepped down. The wood creaked under my weight. The hair glistened below me in the dim yellow light. I continued down the steps, avoiding stepping on her hair until I was standing on the concrete floor. I whirled around. Aha! But the space under the stairs was empty. My blood ran cold. "Jess, this isn't funny," I shouted. "Stop playing games with me." A footstep sounded behind me. I whirled around. The naked bulb in the ceiling only lit half the basement. The other half, where we had rows and rows of storage boxes, was in near total darkness. But I squinted, trying to make it out. In the murky darkness, behind a stack of boxes in the corner, I thought I could see her standing there. I could only see her in my peripheral vision, like how you can only see dim stars when you're not looking right at them because of how your optic cells are arranged. I focused on one of the storage boxes, really stared at it, and when I did, I realized I could see her pale calves extending up into the darkness. And as I stood there, I realized I could hear her breathing. "I can see you there," I said, my voice wavering. "Why are you being so weird? The kids aren't even playing anymore. So come out. Please." Deep in the pit of my stomach, I knew there was something wrong. Something horribly wrong. So I chickened out. "I'm going upstairs. You can join me when you're ready." I headed for the stairs, but halfway there, the bulb flickered and went out. Total darkness surrounded me. I stretched my hands out, blindly groping into the darkness. They only fell on air. I frantically poured through the air, searching for something, anything. My fingers caught in something. Here. I screamed and yanked my hands back. Then I ran blindly into the darkness, but something glanced me off. I shoved at it. I heard a dull thwack, and then I kept running. The side of the banister caught me straight in the chest. Panting, I felt my way to the stairs and climbed them as fast as I could. Then I locked the door to the basement and frantically ran to my kids. They were fine, but as I hugged them, I couldn't get the horrible thought out of my mind. The hair I'd felt, it was higher than my eye level, about 6.5 feet off the ground. Jess is only 5'2". The police searched the entire house. My wife isn't here. They searched the backyard and patrolled in a 3-mile radius. They came up empty-handed. It's like she disappeared off the face of the earth. Except, last night, as I rolled over in bed, I swear my fingers touched something warm. I just want to thank Blair Daniels for allowing me to narrate the story. If you liked what you heard here, head over to their Reddit profile and show them some love. I'll leave a link for this story in the description below. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare. My wife and I have been playing hide and seek for 3 days straight. Update. It's been a while since I updated, and I'm sorry, but my life has been hell. I don't even trust my own sanity anymore. I don't know what's real and what's not. But I do know one thing for sure. Jess, the love of my life, is gone. When she'd been missing for 3 days, I did everything I could to find her. I stapled missing posters to telephone poles. I called friends and family, people she could have escaped to, even though her car was still in the driveway. Even though I knew she must be somewhere in the house, I soldiered on and pretended this was an average missing persons case. But things only got worse. On the morning of day 7, I opened our closet to get dressed. As I scanned the hanging shirts, looking for my purple button-down, I noticed something in my peripheral vision. Something beige-coloured, poking out from under the sleeve of Jess's flannel shirt. I couldn't be sure, but from the brief glimpse I got, it looked like a finger. Every muscle in my body froze. My heart began to pound. My eyes snapped on it, just in time to see a hint of movement in the limp hanging sleeve, as if there was something in there, pulling itself up, coiling further into the shirt. I leapt forward and thrust my arms into the clothes, pushed them back and forth, but there was nothing. Heart throbbing in my ears, I ripped shirts off their hangers and threw them on the ground. I didn't stop until all the clothes were heaped in a pile on the floor. But, of course, the closet was empty. I stood there, panting, feeling like a madman. I must have imagined it. I must have. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the movement in the sleeve of something pulling back up into it, and it made my stomach turn. For a few days, I was able to keep it together. I stuck to the routine of sleep, eat, work, pick kids up, spend time with them, go to bed. I focused on comforting them, telling them that everything would be okay. It was hard to answer their questions. Where's Mummy? When will Mummy be home? But I comforted them as best I could. The three of us were in this together. At least we had each other. But the peace was short-lived. I was watching TV after the kids went to sleep. I got up to get another drink, and I saw something poking out from the wall by the stairs. It was on the second stair, just a little black blob that my brain knew wasn't supposed to be there. What is that? I got up and stepped closer, the voices on the TV growing distant as I focused on it. Did the kids drop some food? Or a sock? Or something? I got closer, and then froze. I recognized it. The shiny black satin, the edge of the bow. It was one of Jess's high heels. And now, as I got closer, I could see a bit of flesh poking out above the edge of the shoe, and a shadow stretching out along the hardwood floor. She's standing there. Jess? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence. I stepped closer, staring at the shoe, at that bit of pale flesh, the top of her foot, sticking out above the curved edge. I grabbed the side of the wall for balance, and then as fast as I could, swung out into the foyer. Nothing. No one was standing on the stairs. I backed away. I felt dizzy. Maybe I'd imagined it. I have had 3 drinks. But deep down, I knew I didn't imagine it. Just like I didn't imagine seeing Jess in the basement that night, or feeling that here in the darkness. I wasn't crazy. At least, I didn't think so. Then again, if I were crazy, I probably wouldn't know. I forced the incident out of my mind. I had to. I had to keep it together. For my Ava and Henry. They'd already lost one parent. They couldn't lose two. So I just focused everything I had on helping them, comforting them, loving them. But then there was that horrible night 2 weeks ago. "Daddy, I'm scared," Ava said as she walked into my room. It was almost 11, way past Ava's bedtime. I groaned, thinking how cranky she'd be when I had to wake her up for school in the morning. "Why are you scared?" I asked, getting out of bed. "There's a monster under my bed." All the blood drained out of my face. Normally, those words wouldn't scare a parent. Kids always think there are monsters under the bed. It's practically a cliche. But going through everything with Jess, my heart sunk into my stomach like an anchor. "I heard it breathing." My heart plummeted further. "Okay, sweetie," I finally said, forcing a smile on my face. "I'll check it out for you." The two of us walked towards her bedroom. My heart throbbed in my ears. When we got to the doorway, I paused. You go to your brother's room, okay? And I'll check it out." She skipped off to his room, and I was left alone. At first, nothing seemed amiss. I could make out most of the room in the dim light from the mermaid nightlight at her bedside. The space under the bed, however, was pitch black. I swallowed. Then I slowly got on my hands and knees. The darkness under the bed was pure black, but when I actually lowered my head to the floor, I saw straight through to the other side. Her pile of stuffed animals and dolls, all thrown together in a heap, the bottom of her unicorn poster, the shaggy purple rug. I began to get up and froze. No. No, no, no. There was hair hanging off the edge of the bed. I lay there, frozen. Black spots danced in my vision. The hair didn't move as I stared at it. It didn't disappear or go away. Is Jess lying on the bed? I sucked in a breath. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. Slowly, holding my breath, I pushed myself up. My eyes peeked over the top of the bed. First, I saw the covers. Then Ava's pillow. Then, for fuck's sake. Ava's frozen doll, Anna, was laying at the edge of the bed. Her hair cascaded over the edge, looking almost black in the dim light. I grabbed the stupid doll and put it on the pillow. Then I grabbed the comforter and shook it out, laying it on the bed and soothing it out. These damn kids, gonna give me a heart attack someday, I swear. "Ava," I called, turning around. "Your room's for..." My breath caught in my throat. The air vent, near the floor, between the metal slates. Two eyes glimmered in the darkness. I expected myself to scream, to run, but I'd had enough of this thing, whatever it was, tormenting me. I scrambled over to the vent. "Hey! Hey!" I screamed. My voice echoed against the metal. "Come back here! What did you do to Jess?" Soft thumping sounds as it crawled deeper into the house. And then, nothing. I let out a shuddering breath. Slowly, I stood up, my heart pounding. I stepped out into the hallway, and then I heard the screams. Seeing that thing in the air vents was nothing compared to the fear I felt when I heard my children scream. I raced down the hallway, every part of my body in panic mode. "Ava! Henry!" I shouted, my feet pounding underneath me. The door to Henry's room hung open. I burst inside. Ava was cowered with Henry, who'd just woken up. Both of them were staring behind me, at the shadows behind the bedroom door. I grabbed the doorknob and, in one swift motion, swung it open, just in time to see a lock of dark hair disappear back into the air vent. "Come on, we're getting out of here." I picked up Henry, grabbed Ava's hand, and we raced for the stairs. Metallic thumping sounds through the walls all around us, as if it were following us in the air ducts, frantically trying to prevent our escape. But we made it out to the car, and then we were pulling out of the driveway, tires screeching against the road. 2 days ago, I put the house up for sale. We can't live here anymore. I don't know what's living in my house now, but it isn't Jess. My wife is gone. I told the real estate everything that happened. It didn't feel right letting another family buy this house, only to be tormented by this thing, but she just looked at me like I was crazy. And maybe I am. But I know now that my kids have seen it too, heard it, felt its presence crawling and slithering within the bowels of our home. So this is the only way I know of to warn you. If you're looking for a house and come across a white house with burgundy shutters behind a picket fence on a dead-end street in Franklin, Pennsylvania, don't buy it. I just want to thank Blair Daniels for allowing me to narrate this story. If you like what you heard here, head over to their Reddit page and show them some love. I'll leave a link for the original story in the description below. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare. I awoke, disoriented and in pain. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead cast a sickly yellow glow that only added to the pounding ache in my head. The walls were made of cold, grey concrete, and the air smelt stale and musty. I sat up, slowly, aware that I had no recollection of how I got here. I tried to recall the events leading up to now, but nothing but a messy fog came through. Panic started to set in as I tried to piece together the events leading up to this moment. "Hello, sunshine," a voice boomed. I looked up and my eyes slowly focused. Dressed in his blue uniform, donut in one hand and a cup of coffee or tea in the other, like a walking stereotype, he smirked at me from the other side of the cell bars. Feigning a smile, I grumbled, "Hey Chief, you're looking good," while rubbing my temples. "Coffee?" he asked, lifting the cup in his hand slightly. "Got anything stronger?" I mumbled back, the hangover hitting me in waves. "Ha, that's what got you in here, John," he snorted, walking up to my cell and placing the paper cup on the bar. Small towns, you gotta love them. I knew all the local police on a first-name basis, and they all knew mine. I felt like I spent more time in here than at my own place. I probably did. But I wasn't always the town drunk. In fact, I'd only recently come to accept that I was. Once upon a time, though, I was a small store manager, running a team of 5 sales and a couple admin staff in an electronics store. I was happy. We were happy. My partner and I had just bought our first place together, a small 3-bedroom 1970s property on an acre of land. It was close enough to town that shopping and travelling to work wasn't an issue, but far enough out that it felt private and quiet, just what we had dreamed of. "Just one more photo," Lucy said, grinning, "before they take the sold sign down." "All right, one more," I replied, feigning annoyance. I really didn't mind, but I couldn't let her know. "All right, smile you two," Mindy, Lucy's sister, said. She aimed the camera at us as we stood in front of the large real estate sign that had the big "Sold" sticker plastered across it. "John, put your hand on her belly," she said, indicating to Lucy's pregnant stomach. I smiled, placing one hand around her and the other resting on the lump of her belly. "Cheese." Lightning cracked outside the cell's only window, and only now I noticed how dark and stormy it was outside. "What time is it?" I asked, rubbing the back of my neck as I stood to go retrieve the coffee. "A little past 5 in the morning," Chief Beveridge replied. Grabbing the cup of coffee off the bar, I raised it in thanks to the chief and took a sip. Instantly, the warm coffee had an effect on my headache, making me feel more awake and alert. I took another sip and let the caffeine work its magic as another crash of lightning lit up the skies, shortly followed by a guttural rolling thunder that shook the prison. Just like the night that changed my life. We had been out celebrating our baby shower with friends and family. The forecast had mentioned a little rain, but nothing like the storm we found ourselves in as we drove home that night. "Maybe slow down a little," Lucy said, one hand on her belly and the other on the dash in front of her as she peered through the windshield at the storm outside. The window wipers were on high, but they were fighting a losing battle against the downpour. Lightning lit up the sky and thunder rattled the car's doors. "I'm already doing half the speed limit. Any slower, we'll just be sitting here," I replied, trying to keep an eye on the cat's eyes reflected in my high beams. The roads were so slick with running water and puddles that the paint lines were impossible to see in the dark. Besides, there's a hot bath and a cold, alcohol-free red wine waiting for you when we get home, I smirked, quickly glancing at her. She looked back at me and returned the smile before looking back at the road. "John!" Lucy screamed. I looked back at the road and my heart jumped in my throat. A fork of lightning illuminated the sky, and in the middle of the road was a figure just standing there. I hit the brakes and swerved. Although I was going well below the speed limit, the wheels locked up and the car skidded uncontrollably across the wet surface. The impact wasn't massive. It didn't need to be. We had slid sideways into a power pole, hitting it with the front passenger door. It wasn't hard, but it was hard enough. They tried to resuscitate her. They tried to save our unborn baby. When I spoke to the police later that night, it had been Chief Beveridge who had been the shoulder I needed to cry on. I told him almost everything that had happened, including that there had been a person standing in the middle of the road. I didn't tell him that the person in the middle of the road was me. A rattling of keys snapped my attention back to my current predicament. "Come on, let's get you home," the chief said as he tried different keys to unlock my cell. "Having a bit of trouble there?" I mumbled. He chose to ignore me. After 4 or 5 attempts, he finally found a key that fit. He swung open the large cell cage door and took a step to the side, motioning with his head for me to leave. As I exited the cell, he held out the donut to me. "Get some sugar into you," he said as I took it from his hand. "Cheers," I replied, raising the donut to take a bite. We walked down the short corridor past the other cells. All were empty, except one which held a large man who looked like a truck driver. He was snoring on his side, though I hadn't heard him earlier due to the thunder and heavy rain outside. The lighting in the station was ancient, as if it had never been upgraded in the 19th century building. The lights flickered as another crash of thunder rattled the walls. "Quite the storm out there. You're lucky the patrol picked you up before you got caught in it," the the chief said as he swiped his card to unlock the door. A little red light flashed up as it emitted a sharp double buzz noise. "Sorry, it does this," he said, wiping the card against his shirt before trying again. This time, a little green light lit up and a long, single buzz sounded out. He leaned on the door handle and pushed it open, leading me through to the main office and reception area of the station. There wasn't much activity in the station, as expected at 5 a.m. A few uniformed officers sitting at desks, some administrators working away on their computers, and 2 team members managing the reception near the entry doors. There was a light buzz of conversation over the clicking of keyboards, and a mounted TV in the corner played some local news channel. It was a large, open space, with computers sitting on a couple of dozen desks that were separated by freestanding cubicle dividers, while 4 glass-walled offices lined the side wall. The offices had their lights off, so it was just the 7 or 8 staff plus the chief and I in the station. We started walking through the maze of desks and chairs. "Let me just grab your things, John," the chief said, indicating for me to take a seat at an empty desk and wait while he headed over to one of the admin members. I looked around the room to see if I recognised any of the staff today, but my sight was still hazy and my eyes didn't like focusing, so I gave up pretty quick. A burst of cold air rushed in, and the sound of rain intensified for a moment as the front door was pushed open. I shivered and rubbed my eyes, trying unsuccessfully to replay the events from the previous evening in my head. Try as I might, I could not remember a thing. All I could think about was that night. After the car had crashed, a couple of windows shattered, letting cold air rush through, the sound of rain hammering down. The figure in the street that I had swerved to avoid had started walking towards the car in the rain. Lit up in the car's headlights, I could see my face, dripping with water, on the body of the stranger walking towards me. A creepy smile spread across my face, as he got closer and closer. He blinked, not a normal up and down blink with the eyelids, but a side-to-side blink with a black set of hidden eyelids. He kept walking, closer and closer, his smile growing bigger and bigger. Then, red and blue lights lit up his face and his smile vanished. He took off, running into the bush on the other side of the road as 2 police cars came around the corner. The front door closed again, and the chilly air and rain had died down when I noticed the room had gone quiet. I took my hand down from my face, opened my eyes, and glanced around the room. The staff had all stopped what they were doing and were looking towards the front of the station. Even the chief was standing still, staring at something. I placed my hands on the desk and stood up slowly, leaning forward slightly to get a better view of the front door. A wave of confusion hit me, as the reason everyone had stopped talking became evident. Standing in the doorway, water dripping on the floor from his blue uniform, was Chief Beveridge. He was breathing deep, laboured breaths and appeared to be covered not only in water but also mud and some blood. He had his gun in his hand by his side and was staring intently across the station at the other chief, the one I had just been speaking with. The other officers and staff were looking back and forth between the 2 chiefs, the dry chief and the wet chief, looking just as confused as I was feeling. One of the uniformed officers broke the silence. Chief, what's going on?" he said, but to which chief I wasn't sure. I noticed the officers slowly reaching for their holsters, and I took a step back. What the hell was going on? The wet chief didn't say anything, but slowly raised his gun towards the dry chief. The officers' training kicked in as they unholstered their weapons and drew them in a flash. "Lower your gun," one of them yelled uncertainly. Finally speaking, Wet Chief yelled, "That is not me," his gun now pointing directly at the Dry Chief. "Lower your gun, Chief," the officer repeated. I looked back at Dry Chief, who was standing with his hand on the shoulder of the admin lady. Susan, I think her name was. The poor woman was visibly shaking in fear, a gun pointed in her direction. She appeared to have wet herself, as I could see liquid dripping to the floor from her seat. "Chief, I don't know what's going on here, but I need you to lower your gun and we can work this out," one of the other officers yelled. Susan was shaking even harder now, convulsing almost. Something wasn't right. The officers started to notice as well. I looked down at Chief Beveridge's hand that was on her shoulder, and my heart stopped. They were across the room from me, and the lighting wasn't the best, but still, I could see in perfect clarity now. His fingers, the parts that I could still see, were black and pulsating. They had penetrated her shoulder, ripping through her top and digging into her skin. I looked down at the liquid that I had first thought was urine dripping from his seat. It was now gushing down, and it was red. I looked back at Dry Chief, my eyes wide and full of clarity now. Dry Chief turned his head slowly towards me, a smile spreading on his face. Then he blinked, a sideways blink, with black, hidden eyelids. When the side-set eyelids slid back, eyes as black as coal had replaced his usually vibrant blue and white pair. I stumbled back, crashing into the desk behind me. Raising my hand to point at Dry Chief, I yelled, "That's not the chief!" A snarl formed on his face, and he whipped his head back towards the officers. Their faces dropped as they saw for the first time his lifeless eyes. They swung their guns around to face Dry Chief, but were too slow. Out of his chest burst multiple black tendrils. In an instant, I watched as the tendrils impaled the other officers and staff. The closest officer was struck directly in his eyeball, dropping his gun immediately as his arms fell to his sides, blood immediately splattering all over his desk. The second officer was struck in the throat, crushing his larynx and snapping his head back. The third officer was struck directly in the chest, with the tendril piercing right through and out of his back. The two receptionists who were facing the Wet Chief, the real chief, were both hit squarely in the back of their head, slamming their heads forward onto the desks in front of them, splattering blood all over the computers, while their last admin staff had been sitting side on to the Dry Chief, and the tendril had hit her directly in the ear. Any remnants of my hangover were completely gone now as I surveyed the horror in the room before me in wide-eyed shock. The officers remained standing, arms dropped to their sides, convulsing as the black, vine-like tendrils weaved out across the room. The other staff shook uncontrollably in the place they had been impaled by this creature. All this in a matter of seconds. The creature's eyes were now completely black, glossed over and lifeless, as it tilted its head back and let out an ear-piercing shriek, unlike anything I have ever heard. In horror, I watched as the impaled bodies at the end of the writhing tendrils all tilted their heads back and began screeching in unison. I slammed my hands to my ears with little effect as, simultaneously, Chief Beveridge started unloading his weapon in the creature's direction, and the glass throughout the police station began shattering. The high-pitched shrieking had caused all the glass in the office to smash. Cups, office windows, and the light bulbs. The room was cast into complete darkness. The creature yelped and stopped screeching as Chief Beveridge managed to hit it at least once before the last light bulb shattered. He fired a few more shots, temporarily illuminating the room from the muzzle flash. I heard multiple thuds, and the room fell silent, bar the ringing in my ears. A moment later, a light beam flickered on from Chief Beveridge's torch as I heard him reload his gun. The torch beam cut through the darkness of the room, scanning the area the creature had just been. It was gone, and the bodies that had been attached to the end of its tendrils had collapsed to the floor. Chief Beveridge swung the beam from one side of the room to the other, calling out, "Do you see it?" to me as he did. In shock, I just stood there, mouth open and heart racing. "Do you see it?" he yelled again, snapping me out of my trance. No, I don't see it," I stuttered. "Make your way over to me, John," he called, "and do it quickly." I started moving in his direction, sticking as close to the outer wall as possible, while frantically looking around the room for the creature. Lightning crashed outside, briefly illuminating the room, before plunging us back into darkness, bar the light of the chief's torch as it darted around the large space. The beam was causing shadows to dance around the station, making it even harder to spot the creature. I crept slowly, with very little light to guide my way, trying not to trip over anything and fear the creature would pounce if I did. Crunching glass broke the silence as I walked past the office where the glass windows had shattered. I tried so hard not to look in the rooms. The chief's torch beam didn't reach the insides of the office, and the corners were pitch black. I felt like the creature could be mere feet away from me, standing in one of the rooms, staring right at me, reaching for me, and I would never know. I gulped, keeping my eyes towards the chief, and pushed that thought down out of my mind. A loud crash caused me to jump as something smashed into a desk on the opposite side of the room, knocking a computer monitor to the floor. I jumped again as the chief swung his torch beam and gun in that direction, firing off 2 shots. I caught a glimpse of the creature, albeit brief, but it was enough to cause panic to rise up in my throat into a scream. All likeness of the chief was gone. It moved on 4, maybe 6 limbs, like a giant demonic lizard. Its pure black skin, blacker than the darkness around it, glistened as the torch beam passed over it, as it moved through the walkways between the cubicles. A large, spiny fin ran down the length of its back, like a dinosaur, and black tendrils would shoot out from its sides, attaching to the desks, chairs and dividers in front and beside it, assisting its movement as it appeared to glide through the space. Desks and chairs moved, like a predator would move grass in a field as it chased down its prey, and it was making a beeline straight for me. "Run!" the chief yelled, firing 3 more shots at the creature. Without hesitating, I took off in a full sprint towards the front door. I could hear the creature crashing through the station behind me, its tendrils firing out at every object, pulling it along with tremendous speed, getting closer and closer with every step I took. I pushed harder, only a few meters left. I could feel the beast behind me, almost feel its breath on my neck. I was almost at the reception desk. A black tendril smashed into the desk beside me, and another into the wall on my other side. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. I turned to look. It towered above me, opening its mouth and exposing rows and rows of sharp, dagger-like teeth that seemed to go all the way down its throat as the smell of rotting bodies washed over me. I was so close, but I was done. I flinched as it moved in for the kill. I just hoped it would be quick, painless. 3 gunshots echoed in my ear in quick succession. The creature screeched again and dove back and away between some desks and chairs. I swung around and the chief just looked at me and said, "Go." I took off to the front door and opened it before looking back at the chief. "Get out of here. Go call the National Guard, the feds, everyone. I can't let it get out," he said as he moved to the door. He pushed me outside and locked the door behind me. I thought about trying to convince him to come with me, but I knew it would be a waste of time. I looked at him through the glass doors, nodded and said, "Thank you." Then I took off to find a phone. And this brings me to now, the reason I am sharing the story with you all, in case I don't make it. You see, I found a phone. The local gas station a few blocks away was open, and after the attendant saw the state I was in and the look of terror on my face, he immediately led me to the office and gave me the phone. I called everyone, the National Guard, the feds, the police stations and the next towns over, but I don't think anyone is coming. I did manage to convince the person I was speaking to at the National Guard to at least call the police station. They reluctantly agreed, putting me on mute, but kept me on the line while they dialed. After half a dozen rings, Chief Beveridge finally answered, and I was extremely relieved to hear his voice. After going through the standard identification process, the man from the National Guard said, "We have reports of major injuries, possibly deaths, in your station. Do you require immediate assistance?" My relief washed away into fear at Chief Beveridge's response. No issues here. We just had our local town drunk, John, causing a bit of a scene earlier. We have released him already, but I think I might do a welfare check on him." I started yelling down the phone as they wrapped up their conversation. Tears formed in my eyes, my screams falling on deaf ears as I was still on mute. The man from the National Guard thanked him and apologised for the inconvenience before coming back to me and warning me about the trouble I could get into for filing false reports and wasting their time. He ignored my pleas and hung up on me, leaving me listening to the dial tone in disbelief. After what felt like an hour, I lowered the phone back to the receiver. As I leaned back in the chair, I could feel the blood running from me, leaving my skin feeling cold and clammy. I lowered my head into my hands, accepting that this was maybe it. I heard the door swing open. Heard the attendant clear his throat. "Do you know how to use one of these?" he asked. I lifted my head from my hands. He was holding an M4 shotgun towards me. He had some sort of assault rifle draped over his shoulder and what looked like a modified Magnum handgun in a holster on his hip. "I heard your call," he said as he handed me the shotgun. My mouth was open in shock. "I've been hunting this thing since it took my brother 2 years ago. You want to help me kill this fucker?" he asked, a hint of crazy in his eyes. I slowly stood, still in disbelief, looking at the slightly greying station attendant. For the first time, I started noticing details about him that I missed earlier, such as his muscular build under the loosely fitting polo shirt, the battle scars on his hands and face, and the Special Forces tattoo peeking out from the bottom of his polo. "Well?" he asked, squinting his eyes at me. I looked at the shotgun in my hands and then back at him, and felt a surge of anger and confidence wash over me. "Fuck yes. For Chief Beveridge," I said. "For my brother," he said. "And for Lucy." That was an original horror story by One More Nightmare. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for One More Nightmare. I'm driving a train, but something has gone wrong, and I'm lost. By Happy Cats for a Sad Girl. Train drivers have read it. I'm looking for some advice on operating procedures. I've driven into a tunnel on my standard route. but after a few minutes all lights and signals went out on the track. Due to risk of collision, I've stopped the train and tried radioing control, but nobody's answering. Any help is appreciated. Edit 1. We've been stopped for 20 minutes now, and passengers are becoming impatient. One has even pressed the passenger alarm. I don't have a guard on board. I'm the only staff. I have some phone signal, but nobody is answering personal numbers. The situation is becoming pretty urgent here, so if anybody has any advice, I'm very open to it. Tunnel is completely dark aside from my headlights. Track ahead is clear. Edit 2. I've started to move the train at 5 miles per hour as we've been stationary for 45 minutes, and I'm concerned that the passengers are becoming uncomfortable or unwell. I am sure that this is a safe speed, and I will be able to stop if there is any obstruction on the track. Have any other rail staff ever had anything like this happen to them? I'm concerned about what could be happening on the network. I've never been unable to contact the team before. Someone please let me know if there has been some kind of incident. News pages don't seem to be loading for me at the moment. I am continuing with caution. Edit 3. New request. Somehow, we've managed to get lost within the tunnel. At some point, I'm not sure when, the track we are following transitioned. I must have missed a changeover, though I don't know how that's possible with the speed and the attention I'm paying. I was focused ahead, making sure that there were no obstructions, and suddenly I realized that the environment had changed. The walls of the tunnel have become rough, looking unfinished. The overhead electrical wires and lights have completely gone, and even the walls are free of graffiti. It's all unfinished stone, looking more like a mine shaft than anything designed for a train. I don't know what to do. All I can guess is that somehow I've taken us down a disused track, maybe very old or very new, and I'm at risk of derailing us if the condition degrades. Oddly, the rails are in good condition down here, and roll out as far as my headlights can pick out. But I don't know how long that will continue. I believe it's too dangerous to continue, and I'm going to have to turn us around. I suppose my new question is what my liability is here. Passenger safety is the most important thing, and I'm doing everything I can, even though I've messed up. Something is not right with all of this. Again, I'm appealing for any help that can be offered. Final note is that the air is cold down here, much colder than the other track. The day has been mild so far, but nothing like this. I opened the window briefly and I could swear my breath was fogging. I'm going to stop the train and drive us back out the way I came in. Hopefully I can raise someone on the radio in that time. Edit 4. The situation has developed and I'm looking for any advice on how to get my passengers to safety. As many of you know, I have to walk through the train and access the second cockpit at the other end to change direction. I sent a PA message first informing the passengers that we were stopping due to unforeseen complications, would be reversing, and that we would reach the next stop as soon as possible. I then left the driver carriage and entered the train proper. Unsurprisingly, the passengers were very agitated, and I had to spend longer than I liked trying to field questions and concerns from scared and angry people, with a number of them bringing up threats of lawsuits or similar. Luckily, I was able to push through the majority of the carriages, stepping through the separating doors without too much issue. A point I should note here is that the carriages are not conjoined. The doors lead outside and I have to step across the gap to enter the next car, making sure to lock the doors behind me. This means that I spent time outside the train and I can confirm the air is icy and thin. Any thoughts of exploring the tunnel on foot are gone. I want to be out of here as soon as possible. The only other area of concern were the cars in the middle of the train. The people inside were frightened and jumped violently as I entered. They said that they had heard a sound from outside the train, scraping in the tunnel, and even something banging against the walls of the carriage. Although I did my best to placate them and took a brief look around as I moved on, I couldn't find anything that would cause sounds like that. No loose wires or stones, and no signs of animals. I'm sure it's nothing, but it is still a good reason to get moving quickly. I have taken my seat in the second cockpit and have begun driving back the way we came. It is disturbingly similar to the view I had driving into this awful tunnel, but I suppose hewn rock looks like hewn rock. I will update when I can. Edit 5. I have lost control. This forum is now for me to document that I took the best decisions I could under the circumstances. I am doing all I can to keep this train and the people inside it safe. We have been backtracking for longer than we were originally moving down this forsaken tunnel, and there have been no track switches, no changes, no way back to the correct route. All I can see is the cone of light in front of me as the train moves. It's colder too, cold enough that there is condensation on the windows, that I can feel it seeping through the walls of my cabin. And we're descending. I am now almost certain we are travelling downhill. There is a pull, gentle but very real, towards the windscreen, and I don't know where it's taking us. All I know is that I'm travelling at a safe speed to stop if I need to, but fast enough to get us away. Because now I hear things too. I thought we had driven over something at first, but then I heard more. Thumps along the side like we were hitting branches, but there was nothing ahead of us that we could be hitting. Then it was the roof, a thud, followed by scraping, something moving along over my head. I tracked it, whatever it was, sliding backwards towards the length of the train before disappearing. There were moments of silence after. Then the screech of the passenger alarm made me jump out of my skin. It came again and again, someone hammering the button.
"There's something outside, something on the train,"
came a panicked woman's voice, before being immediately cut off by another alarm and a man's shout.
"We're in number 3. Something is banging on the roof. What the hell is happening? You've got to stop this."
The alarm went again and again, each time a new terrified voice being cut off by the next.
"There's something on the... Help us! What do you do with it? Between the doors, in front of us, looking at me. You've got to do something in the window. Police now. Call the fucking police now. Unlock the goddamn doors."
I can still hear them, even without the comms. The screams are coming from the carriages behind me, with the crashes and bangs still going. I've turned off the alarm though, turned off the radio. I have to concentrate. I have to get us out of here. What am I meant to do here? What am I meant to say to those poor people? I can't help them. All I can do is drive this cursed train and pray that we see sunlight again. 6. Christ help me. They're people. There's people on the tracks. I thought it was a mannequin when I saw the first, pale and still, arms by its side, staring as we went past. It turned its head though. Turned its head and watched us go past. And then there were more, dozens of them, hundreds. They lined the tracks, only inches between them and the train that rushed past. Not even a flinch from them, completely emotionless. Are they what is making that noise? Could they be climbing on my train? They are nothing like the squatters that we get. These things are unnatural. I no longer care about procedure, about safety. All I care is about getting this train somewhere else. If this is a mine shaft, a new track, even if it's hell itself, I don't care. I've maxed out the speed. Now I'm just watching those creatures and the track blur past. This has to end somewhere. The sounds from behind me seem to have stopped. I don't know if that's good or bad. I dare not ask on the radio. I'll update again if I can. Update 7. Apologies for the delay. Thank you to everyone that reached out by message asking after me. I apologize for the delay in getting back to you all. I am safe, and as of yesterday, I quit my job as a driver. I don't think I will ever set foot near a railway again. About an hour after my last post, there was suddenly a burst of sunlight. We came hurtling out of the tunnel, far faster than the legal limit, and I had to immediately slam on the emergency brake. Normally, when you hit the brakes like that, You hear shouts from your passengers, but the cars behind me were dead silent. Slowly, I began moving again, heading towards the nearest station, barely able to see in the harsh daylight after so long underground. My boss wanted to fire me. It's not like I can blame him. I was AWOL for 2 hours and reappeared with a dented train pulling the wrong way into a station on the wrong track. By all rights, I could have been arrested. The union had my back though. Talked her down to an immediate resignation if I didn't press charges for the faulty signalling. I expected hell when I opened those train doors at the station. As the train stopped, I felt light and shaky, trying to process what had just happened and the normality of a railway stop. In the moment, I tried to say something on the radio, to apologise or announce the station, but my mouth was dry and my hands were trembling too badly. So instead I just opened the doors, opened my own, stepped out onto the platform and braced myself for the hell of shouting and screaming and threats that would come my way. But there were none. Instead, they just filed out, silent and pale, and stood there on the concrete staring at me. I'll never forget that as long as I live, how they watched me, hundreds of them, blank-faced as I just turned and ran. I just want to thank Happy Cats for a Sad Girl for allowing me to narrate this story. If you liked what you heard here, head over to Reddit and show them some love. I'll leave a link for the original story in the description below. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare. My plane landed at an airport that doesn't exist. I'm never giving up my seat for cash again. By Jam Franz. I want to tell you about something that happened to me very recently, so you can hopefully avoid the same experience that I had. I hadn't flown in several years, otherwise maybe this would have all struck me as odd, much sooner than it did. I was flying home from visiting a friend in New York and my flight was very overbooked. There had been cancellations too, so the gate area was packed with people anxiously hoping for a seat. Since I was travelling by myself and didn't have to get back to work for a few days, I happily accepted cash to take a later flight. I wasn't in a rush and hadn't checked the bag, so at the time it seemed well worth a couple of hours wait for the amount that they offered me. They drew a strange symbol on the back of my hand when I accepted the payment. It was dark and looping, drawn on thickly, and it captivated me as my eyes felt the need to trace the flow of the lines over and over. I figured at the time that it was intended to give some indication to employees, perhaps to prevent me from trying to keep getting more money or vouchers if my next flight was also full. I ended up having no trouble getting on my later flight. Looking back, that was strange. For starters, quite a few people accepted cash, credit and vouchers, and there were multiple cancellations, so it should have been fairly full. But I was the only one in my entire row, across the aisle too. There were maybe 15 people on the entire flight. It was so empty that we could have each had our own private row of seats if we chose to. Otherwise, it was an uneventful flight. I had dozed off and woke up well after we landed to a flight attendant shaking my shoulders frantically. Her face had a strange expression on it, like a mixture of annoyance and deeply seated fear. All the other passengers were long gone. As I grabbed my backpack and headed towards the door, the small flight crew lined up to see me off the plane, which in itself wasn't too bizarre, but they seemed anxious. Some were checking their watches while others rocked back and forth nervously. I received pats on the back, an annoyed glare from the lady who had woken me up, one tearful smile, and then the pilot thanked me for my gift. I figured at the time they had confused me with someone much more important than I am. Now, I understand. As soon as my backpack had cleared the main cabin door, they closed it again behind me so fast that it almost hit me. As I left the jetway, I noticed that something was very wrong. Firstly, this wasn't my airport. And this airport looked run down, if not totally abandoned. I looked at my new ticket nervously, and sure enough, it had an airport code I'd never seen on it. I felt like an idiot for not paying more attention when I took the cash and was given the new boarding pass. I had wrongly assumed I was going to be flying into the same airport, just on a later flight, especially since the employee booking it had confirmed the city, and the marquee at the gate had listed the correct city on it too. Granted, there are 2 airports near my home, but either of those would have been fine, and this was not one of them. I frantically looked around for someone that could help me get to the right place, but there wasn't another soul in sight. No passengers waiting to board, no one from my flight, no employees. I was completely alone. I could hear a faint, sharp scraping sound. The plane had begun to pull away. They hadn't even waited for someone to move the jet bridge away from the plane first. I was in a strange airport, and I looked to be totally alone. I pulled out my phone to see where the hell I was, and not only was there no Wi-Fi available, I didn't have data either. I sighed and resigned myself to wandering the terminal for any signs of life. It'd be a long night, but I'd figure out a way to get home, I told myself. Probably. I think I was too tired to be alarmed at that point. I finally began to take in my surroundings. I was in a beautiful, if dated, terminal. My eyes were drawn to gold relief art along the walls. It was really unique, though as I approached and began to make out the details, I personally thought that the scene it depicted was far too disturbing to be on display in a public space like this. An odd-looking creature seemed to be tearing a man apart, while weird figures looked on. This airport looked to be completely abandoned. There was no power. Instead, the last of the light streaming in through large windows of intricately patterned stained glass painted everything a deep red hue. Ceiling tiles were strewn about, and some rested upon the dilapidated seats. My sense of unease grew the longer I took in my surroundings. There was something reverent about the place. It was almost church-like, but I shivered. My gut told me that nothing holy had ever dwelt here. It smelled faintly of fire. The fabric chairs had also taken up the scent. On the ground, there was a thick grey dust as far as the eyes could see. The dark powder crept into my sandals and had settled onto seats and countertops, and even the crevices within the art along the walls. I noticed the footprints of my fellow passengers and figured I'd follow them to find my way out, since the exit and other signs were either damaged or totally non-existent. After a point, the footprints began to diverge as others looked to have gone in different directions. I noticed that one group had headed off towards what I guessed to be more gates, down a long, darkened tunnel. I stared for a while, but I couldn't see an end to the darkness. Since the last of the light outside was fading quickly and there seemed to be no power, I decided that route wasn't for me. I followed the other group's prints that went in the opposite direction, towards a more open lobby. Eventually, the footprints began to tell a story that confused and frightened me. At one point, an additional set of prints had joined the group, as if someone or something had emerged out of nowhere and began walking on all fours or crawling alongside them. Soon after, the passengers' footprints became erratic. They must have started running in different directions. I followed a couple, but eventually each pair of human footprints ended abruptly, as if they'd been plucked right out of existence. It was so quiet. I wondered, had none of the other passengers made it out? I suddenly heard movement directly above me, a scratching sound like something was being dragged along the ceiling. Or crawling. I didn't even look up, just sprinted back the way I had come. After getting what I deemed a safe distance away, I allowed myself a glance back. Something lithe-looking and shadowy was moving along the ceiling above where I had been. It eventually disappeared back into a hole left by a fallen ceiling tile. I was back near the stained glass windows and gold art, where I had first deplaned. The dusk had faded away unnaturally quick, and in the burgeoning darkness, I noticed something odd about the night sky. It wasn't like the sky I could see from home. It was too clear. There was no light pollution, and I could see more stars than I'd ever seen before. It was as if there wasn't a single light in existence. I steeled myself, fueled by my growing sense of unease, and reluctantly decided I'd try heading through the tunnel. As I approached and my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed something strange up ahead of me. It was unlike anything I had seen before, but it seemed to be some sort of living creature, and it was cradling one of the passengers on my flight. It was smooth and seamless looking, but the more I stared, the less the details seemed to make sense. Limbs and features didn't line up with the body. They swirled and shifted, and had only a vague suggestion of form, but the pieces never fully connected. The only thing I could see clearly was the same symbol I had on my hand, looked to be carved into what I presumed to be the torso of this thing. Looking at the creature gave me a stabbing headache. Even now, I can't fully describe what I saw, just bits and pieces. Long, thin appendages that seemed to flow in and out of existence. A featureless face with indentations where features should be. Its head made me think of someone fighting to inhale through a black plastic bag. It was bent in such an unnatural way that I imagined it at its full height was more than the airport could contain. The passenger thrashed in its grip and let out a haunting sound, like the last breath was being pulled from his lungs, as he slowly shriveled into nothingness before my eyes. The creature in response gave a deep sigh that seemed to indicate contentment, and I once more smelled that acrid burning smell. The man crumbled like the dust that coated the floor, and soon what was left of him commingled with it. They had become one and were indistinguishable. I thought about the thick, ashy dust I was ankle deep in, and how I could feel it in my sandals, between my toes. As things began to click into place, I felt sick and longed for nothing more than to be safe at home and throw my sandals as far away from me as possible. I gasped unintentionally, understanding 2 seconds too late that if it hadn't already seen me, I had just revealed my location. It began to move closer, and I realized then, in a moment of panicked clarity, that I knew of a door to outside. Granted, it would probably be a 10-foot drop to the ground, but that seemed a hell of a lot more appealing than sharing the man's fate that I had just witnessed. I ran, shuffling through the ash back towards the jetway, and closed the door behind me. It was almost more habit than anything, as I highly doubted the door would be able to hold something like that back. When I got to the end, despite the clear, deep night I had seen from the terminal, I could see a grassy field lit by the setting sun through the opening. There was no runway or any other visual cue that I was at an airport. There were just scrubby trees and yellowed grass burnt by the summer heat for as far as my eyes could see. It looked like home. I tried to reach it, but I couldn't. It was like hitting an invisible wall. I thought for a moment and then I tried my other hand. I realized that everything except my marked hand could pass through. I rubbed at it, but it was drawn in thick black lines using permanent marker. Of course. I scrubbed for what felt like an eternity, and I tried not to picture that monster emerging from the door to the terminal, shifting, liquid-like, its massive body blocking all escapes as it closed in. I rubbed more frantically. By the time I heard the jet bridge protest against the creature's weight, I was half resigned to the fact that I would never leave, thinking how terrible it would be to die now at the doorway. I was so close. I could see the pinks and orange of the sunset on the plains and the world just beyond my grasp. My world. I wildly thought for a moment about how animals caught in a trap would bite through flesh, bone, tendons to escape, and I felt a sort of morbid kinship with them. I considered that for a moment and realized I was being ridiculous. I didn't need to bite my hand off, just a part of it. As it closed the distance between us, I had started to make progress, and its proximity encouraged me to move faster and fight through the pain. To my immense surprise, once it had nearly reached me, it stopped. It didn't pursue me further or move to grab me. It just watched me. A sort of intelligence emanated from it. It seemed to be studying me, waiting. Finally, the symbol was gone. I spat off to the side and reached my stinging, dripping hand through. To my immense relief, it worked. I jumped out with the goal of rolling into soft landing, but instead painfully hit the ground. There was no jet bridge or airport where I was now. I was flat on my back in a field, staring at the open sky. The last thing I saw of the creature was several black fluid-like limbs floating against the colourful sky of my world, as it must have been tentatively reaching out the door I had jumped through. It never fully emerged, likely bound in place the same way I had been only moments earlier. I was able to get home. I was actually only several miles from a road. It turns out there had been an airport in that exact spot that was demolished decades ago, replaced by the larger airport I typically fly into. But even knowing that, nothing I experienced really makes any more sense to me. The only comfort I eventually found was that it didn't follow me. It probably can't get out. Right? I just want to thank Jam Franz for allowing me to narrate this story. If you liked what you heard here, head over to their Reddit page and show them some love. I'll leave a link for this story in the description below. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. And as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare.